Hey guys, welcome to a Consult ROI podcast. I've got Angela Bradford here today as our great guest of honor. So Angela is a financial expert across United States and Canada. She actually still lives in Canada. We'll try not to hold it against her here. But, yeah, we're happy to have you here and just give you a brief overview and about yourself and anything you want the people to know.
Sure, sounds good. So a little bit about my background. I was homeschooled. I'm dyslexic. Went into blue collar. I was a horse trainer for 17 years. I built houses. I was a long haul truck driver. Used to run California back every week. And, things got slow in 2015. And that's when I got introduced to the financial services industry. Realized I could start part-time. I could learn about money. I could get a license to prove I was smart. And because I was homeschooled, I was never passed, I never did my GED, never graduated from high school technically. And so I wanted to prove I was smart. So that's when I got started in financial services. Within a year, I just saw the difference that we could really make for families and the huge need that was out there for financial literacy. And so I quit trucking, came full-time, and was like 1/8 of my income coming full-time, not highly recommended. Came full-time, built a business completely cold market, as my friends and family were great, but all of them weren't overly supportive. So I just learned to make friends really fast. As an introvert in homeschool, that was a lot of personal development and a lot of work. And fast forward, it's been 8 years in the industry now, and it's been absolutely life-changing. It's been incredible. I was my first claim. 2019, I was diagnosed with MS, which is an autoimmune disorder where the body attacks itself. Learned a whole bunch about myself, learned a whole bunch about all kinds of stuff. Had a policy that paid me $100,000 for getting MS. Congratulations. And again, saw the need for what we do and how many people are struggling with stuff. And since then, we've had five claims just for critical illnesses. So huge need. But what I love is the development of leaders in our business. And that was something I had to learn. And that's something I'm enjoying learning and teaching people. We're at 55 licensed agents across Canada and the US. Our goal is a license in every state and province in the next 4 years, and 250 licenses by the end of next year. So we have big goals. So we just got to back it up with the work and the personal development, I guess, to get there. So that's my story in a really brief nutshell.
Fair enough. So how does somebody introverted, or how did you get over that? I know how I did, which was essentially forcing. Like I really did not like socializing at all. Socializing is definitely a skill that I had to develop substantially. And so the only way I was able to do that personally is by forcing myself to do sales and customer service roles for a while, just so I could understand and be forced to talk to people and that. And even then, I'm still working on it, frankly. Like, this podcast is part of that. So for you, what was that? What did that look like in that, especially getting outside of your comfort zone?
Well, I didn't really have an option. So I had to go make friends. I had to build a business. And, I didn't have people that, were reaching out to me. So I just had to go out. So I went out to the malls. I went out to downtown. I went out to Walmart. I went out to all the grocery stores, and I would prospect people for 8 to 12 hours a day. When I came full time, I'd get blisters on my feet, and I just go out talking to people. And I remember, I made a commitment to get 3 new numbers a day until I hit my first major promotion. And, I did that. And so part of it obviously is just making a decision and making a commitment. And then secondly, I went out one day and I had people cheer me on. They were saying, man, no one's got 25 new numbers in a day. Can you do that? I was like, all right, let's go do this. So I went out and got 25 new numbers that day. So I probably talked to 100 people to get 25 numbers. I was not super good at talking to people. But that's where my identity started to shift. And as your identity shifts, your results start to shift. And so I've done that now. I did that a couple times. And now, like, getting numbers is, I would say, relatively easy. I still don't necessarily like it, but it's not about me. It's about the people who I'm going to serve, by giving them an opportunity to completely change their life.
Fair enough. So I know you make it sound a lot easier than it really is. We both know that. So what was that, the process that helped you get over that hurdle to where you could hold yourself accountable? to meeting those goals and putting yourself out there. Because I know there's a lot of introverts out here that are like, oh, I could never do that. That seems so scary and everything, and they'll shut down from fear or something. And it is a huge inhibitor on why they haven't accomplished their dreams. Why haven't they haven't taken that plunge into the dream business, or taking their business to be as successful as it could be, right? I know for a fact that even me sometimes in that will not always make all the social interactions just because I feel drained. Like
Mhm.
obviously as an introvert, when you talk to people all day, it does
Drain you.
drain you.
Yes.
Um, so, and it is like a muscle. It's like working out. You don't build that muscle until you keep consistently doing it. But
Mhm.
I remember those beginning phases. Like it's not fun. So
No.
for you, what was that look like? How did you start developing that muscle and get those little micro wins to where you could do those, 8, 12 hour days and just talking to people? Because that just seems crazy.
Well, let's back up. So 8 to 12 hours, I was out walking. I wasn't necessarily talking. So I was super terrified. So I would walk around and then I'd be like, oh, I should go talk to that person. I'm like, oh no. And then I talk myself out of it. And but like I was committed to 3 new numbers. So for me, self-discipline is, I guess, first of all, and I mean, it would take me 8 to 12 hours sometimes to get 3 new numbers, which is kind of crazy because now I could do out that in like 15 minutes. But like I would go out and do that in like 8 to 12 hours. So like I said, I wasn't the best use of my time per se, but I was out there trying to work, I guess. So I think a lot of it was, you just have to attach to a big enough why that, the how you just figure it out. So, my big thing was my parents at the time. That was what I really attached to. And so I would sit there and I would, like, when I didn't want to talk to someone, I would visualize my parents sitting on the street corner and the rain falling on them and they didn't have a place to stay. And they'd be like, why didn't you work harder? And I'd get really emotional and I'd go talk to that person. And I did that a lot. So I needed something that would drive me that was more emotional than the fear. So if the emotion is what drives people back things up with logic, but emotion is what drives people. So you need to have something that's worse or better. I don't know if people work on either side than the fear that stops someone from achieving their full potential. And I still don't always talk to the people I should. I still am the same way. Like it's not like I've got it figured out, that's for sure. But I just have realized, and different people are driven by different things. And so, if you're listening to this, maybe you're driven by, a trip, or maybe you're driven by, we have a lot of contests in our company, trips like that. So that's awesome. People are really driven by like going to Hawaii or, incentive trips and that lifestyle. Or some people are driven, and I'm driven by the dark side, more than like, if I don't do it, what would happen? And so that drives me way more than if I do it, what will happen? So so you got to know what your side that drives you. A really good book is Relentless by Tim Grover, and he talks about the dark side. And, for me, that's something I've really hooked into and been okay with, that I have that side, and that side is a side that drives me way more than like, oh, a car or a jet, or like I want all those things, kind of. Like, I'll be honest, it's a kind of thing. Jet's more like I need one because fly a lot. But the dark side, like, what if I don't? What if I'm not there for my family? What if, and then when my health changed, I just realized the relevance of like, what if I don't build this thing fast enough? And one day I'm in a wheelchair or worse for the rest of my life, and I didn't actually max out my potential. And the end of my life comes and I look back and I'm like, man, I didn't do everything I could. That scares me more than the concept of, like I said, the bright side of like making good money and traveling the world and all that kind of stuff, which I'm blessed I get to do. But that didn't drive me, like, and it still doesn't drive me like the side of, what if I don't?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually got to shake hands with Tim Grover and Andy Purcell and all those guys over at the Limitless arena. So that was awesome. But I do believe that most driven people are driven by the dark. Um, and it's because they get to the point in their life where enough is enough. And it's just like if you're having a nightmare, right? and you're running from these monsters that are chasing you and trying to hurt you and devour you. Eventually, at least for me, I used to have significant, even night terrors. And it got to a point in my youth and that where I couldn't keep, like I couldn't sleep at all most of the night or anything else. And so I just kind of reached a point in my life where I remember this conscious switch and everything is like, this life sucks. Like not being able to sleep sucks and everything else. I'm tired of running. I'm going to sit there with those demons and that, and I'll face them. And I remember consciously in my head even. And so even in these night terrors, I would have these like horrific, whether it was like zombies or like other critters or whatever else, or these awful things that were happening to me or family or whatever. And I just remember like just balling up my fists and everything and turning around and just having that calm, like feeling come over me is like, whatever happens, happens, but I'm tired of running. I will fight from this point. Like I'm not going to ever run a second again. And I think that that's really what you're describing, at least, is enough is enough. And I'm not going to keep tolerating mediocrity. I'm not going to keep tolerating this subpar life. Most people, I think Tim Grover even touches on this, where he's like, well, most people, they'll run away from that because that confrontation, or what I call it is the dead bodies in your walls. There's people like you put them in your wall, you wall it off and everything, but it still stinks. You know, you still permeates and everything. You can still tell that like rotten decay is there, and there's no way to, like, you have to confront that and get it out of your house, right? I know it's a very morbid example, but it's the quickest way to see. It doesn't matter if you wall it off or anything else. It doesn't matter what you do. Like even if your dog's shit all over the house, you got to clean out all that crap, right? And you got to be willing to do that. But most people what they'll do is they'll numb themselves. They'll dive into social media, scrolling on reels, video games, all these different things to numb it or distract or push off or procrastinate or whatever else. And that to avoid that sitting alone with themselves to address the concern, right? And I think that we all get caught into that sometime where we'll do the mindless scrolling or other stuff every now and then. But that's basically our subconscious telling us like, hey, we're just seeking something else or seeking some other temporary solution to fill that void. So obviously for you, it was definitely like that disappointment of your family, and not living to your potential and realizing like, and I think you've had to have frankly just had that alone time enough to sit with those to realize or come to that realization, because a lot of people don't even realize they're like, I'm not sure what's holding me back. I'm not sure. And that, and that's why I don't think a lot of people actually truly get to that point in their life where they find their why. So for you, what was something that really was like, obviously that was a huge monumental pivot point or fulcrum point in your life that allowed you to change and drastically get to where your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish now. What was kind of the highest ROI in your life and everything that's resulted out of all of this?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that happened for me was when I got MS in 2019. And so I don't know if you know much about MS, but it can.
I have several family members that have it, so I understand.
So it really attacks the body.
They were in a wheelchair.
Yeah, it really attacks the body, and going from 8 to 12 hours. By that point, I built a business. I wasn't quite out that much, but I was still prospecting a lot. And to go from that and not being able to really walk, when I started to know I had problems, I'd be out prospecting, and then my vision would start to go blurry, and I'd try to get back to my car and I'd be like stumbling and like falling into cars, setting off a car alarms. I could, and then I'd like have a break and then I'd be good. So I could like barely walk at times. And it was really scary, I guess, until I was diagnosed. And then that was at least helpful to know what it was. But I mean, all of a sudden, my primary thing that I was using to build a business was basically, I felt like taken away from me. And, so I was like, okay, so God took away my legs, basically, literally, in a sense. I'm not in a wheelchair, but literally in a sense. And I was like, okay, now what? And so that New Year's, I read a book called The Circle Maker by Pastor Mark Batterson. It's my favorite book. I read it every New Year's, and it's about the power of prayer. And he just talks about how like God wants the world to know that things are done through him and not through somebody. And so I was like, okay, well, that's what's happening here. So I was like, I set a huge goal for that year. We didn't hit it, but we did grow 167% in 2020. And one of the things that I did was, I said, I'm not going to work on Sundays anymore. I was working 7 days a week all the time, like a lot of entrepreneurs. And, to take that day off was really hard for me. So many people are like, hey, the only day I can meet up is Sunday. And I'm like, oh, I'm booked and I have nothing on my calendar. And I was like, this is really hard. And so that year was like so difficult. And then, yeah, like I said, we grew 167%. So someone said to me, like, what if you take off the whole week? Like, I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. But anyway, it doesn't work that way. But, that was a huge catalyst of like, so that year I knew that coming to, I had to up my associations and I had to make some major changes on that. So actually that January, we were already scheduled. We went down to Ed Milet's Laguna Beach house, which was really cool. As a team, there's about 10 of us. I went down there. And then I also signed up for my first big event, which was a John Maxwell event. I never met John Maxwell. That ended up being in West Palm Beach. And, that was, for me, that was a huge thing. That event, Canadian, with our exchange rate, was $20,000. And I was probably making 100K at the time, which, you do the math, that was a huge investment into myself. And so when I went there, it was really scary for me. It was a lot of imposter syndrome. I didn't feel I belonged. I mean, a lot of these people, when I started meeting them, they were like multimillionaires and more probably. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? And so I really had to work through imposter syndrome. But that was, I think that year was a huge shift and a huge catalyst, facing that I had MS, that in my books, I created it. I created, this in my life through stress. And so I also know that, we can get rid of it, which is an empowering thought, but I had to learn from it. I still am learning from it a lot about myself. So that was huge. And then getting into personal development, starting to really rely on my team and help, they needed to help me because I wasn't able to do everything physically that I was before. So to me, that was probably the biggest change. And from there, just really investing in myself. I'm, massive into the personal development circle and world. And it's just kind of interesting. I mean, that was 2020. And, this year I got to go on a private jet with John Maxwell. And, I've been to his house. I've been to a couple of Ed's houses and, been to Andy Frisella's house. Like, it's kind of crazy where my life has gone when I take a moment and think about it in 3 years. So, but, it's taking that first step and that first fear factor of like putting the money down and investing in yourself. I think that's a huge thing that a lot of people are scared to do. They invest in a lot of things, but not actually in yourself. And you are your best ROI.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I mean, major props to you because a lot of people with MS and that, including a lot of my family members and that, they did kind of go more the poor pity route and everything, or they chose, like, they willingly walked just as soon as they started feeling any pain and everything, because I'm not going to lie, it is severe, like muscle pains and all sorts of other stuff. I've seen the toll that it takes on people, and so a lot of people's result is just to take the easy way and just they'll immediately willingly walk to the wheelchair. Mm-hmm. Just to like, oh, I can't do that, this is hurting too much or whatever. And so kudos and props to you that you were willing to confront that pain, that discomfort, and push yourself out and everything, but also be self-aware enough to be like, hey, no, I need to take that day of rest to actually recoup and everything. And I need to hold these commitments and everything And just because I have these commitments doesn't mean that I need to overwork myself and
Mhm.
perpetuate or uh, accelerate those
Exactly.
issues.
Make things worse. Yes.
Exactly. So yeah, major props for you on that. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people that will invest, and even people that invest in a lot of these self-help ones. Um,
Mhm.
I believe that they go there with the intention on hearing or getting that boost that you get from those events,
Mhm.
but they don't actually learn anything. So they're not really investing in themselves.
Mhm.
So this is something that if you're already doing a lot of self-help, if you're already listening to podcasts like this, you're already at least down that road where you're
Mhm.
investing in yourself, right? But to truly actually get any return out of that investment, because you can invest all day and get still negative returns.
It's true.
Um, the goal is though, and the reality is when you want, if you want positive returns, you've actually got to put in the work. You've
Mhm.
actually got to apply what you're learning from these people, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes it's learning what not to do more than learning what to do,
Right.
right?
It's
Like,
true.
hey, oh, okay, here's what I'm doing to sabotage myself. Here's what I'm doing to burn out and reach these huge issues. Here's what I'm doing to cause health issues. Because if you don't have health, if you don't have wealth, if you don't have financial stability, you don't have freedom. I mean, that's the whole basis of what we started with Boldly Free American, and that is because like there's so many people are captive by like living paycheck to paycheck and captive by um, very struggling health issues or having to cope every day with their life by drinking excessive amounts of alcohol or
Mhm.
even social drinking all the time just to get through life.
Mhm.
And I realized that like that's not any kind of life to live. Like that's miserable, right?
Mhm.
So for you anyway, what uh, I really want to kind of summarize what you really said, which is there's a couple different pivot points in that, which is when enough is enough, right? Then you're able to push through and find that clarity on saying, no, I'm not going to tolerate this mediocrity. I'm going to get what I want and achieve that. Um, and like another thing that you also said was don't beat yourself up when you don't reach those goals and that like you when you're highly ambitious and that you will not and you should always set those larger than life goals
Mhm.
because as you said you're like you might not have reached that crazy goal but
Mhm.
you still grew 160%.
Mhm.
Like that's nothing to laugh at.
Mhm.
And I don't think honestly if you had set the goal that you achieved
Mhm.
you probably would have been significantly
I've been
less.
lower. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's kind of funny how that works. Um, and this is that muscle in your head that all of you that are listening, I think, really do need to develop, which is instead of looking at, hey, I have to run a mile, and you're already tired at less than a quarter of a mile, and you're like, oh, okay, it's just too long to run. I'm just gonna quit. It's like, no, I'm gonna get as far as I can until my legs say that I am not doing no more, right?
Right.
But a lot, as you know, a lot of challenges, both physically and mentally, um, are 100% actual mental health.
Mental.
Like it is a mental objective and everything, and that's obviously one thing that we both can understand, and that with especially with 75 hard
Mhm.
and Andy Frisella and all of that.
Mhm.
Um, I had never really seen the program or knew anything about it until much later. I had been doing those same type of programs in other aspects, and that is like, hey, put yourself in
Mhm.
consistent areas of discomfort
Mhm.
where I can build that mental discipline to to accomplish whatever I set my mind to, right? And then eventually I think the next phase after that, after you get the mental discipline to accomplish and be like, hey, whatever it is, it's going to get done, is also the humility to and the power of saying no. right? To cut anything that does not add to your life, doesn't contribute to your life, and takes up mental bandwidth that really destroys a lot of those things. So for you, what was a lot of those things in your life that may have been taking up a lot of bandwidth or taking a toll on your health or whatever else that you were also able to trim out or cut out of your life? And that I know, like, working on Sundays was part of that, right?
Mhm.
And kind of giving yourself that break and that recoup and everything actually did
Help a lot.
that with trimming some of that excessive workout.
Mhm.
But it did help you quite a bit just by
Mhm.
doing that. So what is some other things in your life that has really helped you just by removing it?
It's a great question. I would say, I mean, I feel like I removed pretty much almost everything. The scrolling's still a thing a little bit. We're working on that. Where we waste a little bit too much time on random scrolling. But I don't have Netflix. I don't have TV. I have it for, I don't even remember when I don't know. It's been years. So the only thing that I watch, like my chill on Sunday, is like I love popcorn. And so I have popcorn and like I'll watch YouTube and it'll be like John Maxwell or Ed Milet or Dr. Joe Dispenza. So that's my TV and that's like all I watch, quote unquote. If I'm watching anything or listening to anything, I do listen to a lot of stuff. I really cut out, I guess, any novels. I don't even, but it's so funny because people say this to me. They're always like, what did you sacrifice to get where you're at? And I'm like, none of it felt like a sacrifice. Like sacrifice sounds so like dramatic. For me, none of it felt like I cut anything out. I just chose something else that I like better and, benefited me more and benefited my family more. It's not like I'm like, oh my gosh, I missed the season of Friends or something. I don't even know what's out there, what's popular. I have no idea. Or I missed it. I don't even feel that way, like at all. I'm like, I don't like, I try to watch something like that and I'm like, this is such like, I just feel my brain cells dying. So I'm like, this is crazy. I can't do this. I just don't even want to do it. So I guess like, you say you cut things out, like, I don't go to the bar. I used to do that. But I don't want to. So, it's kind of funny. Like you start to get just obsessed with what you're obsessed with, which is growth. And, outside of that, I'm like, well, people are like, what do you do for fun? I'm like, well, I sleep. That's awesome. I love sleep whenever I get to it. And I like reading and I love the water and just being by it. But I guess I don't have a lot of quote hobbies. I'm working on maybe having a life outside of that. But right now, that's kind of where I'm at. So I feel like I cut out a lot of stuff, but it doesn't feel like I cut it out, if that makes sense. It just feels like it was just a choice to pick
Absolutely.
something better.
I look at it as like if you're buying a steak or not, you don't really care for the gristle anyway, especially if it's a cheap cut, right? And so you just are cutting out the parts you don't care for,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So it's not necessarily saying that you hate steak or anything, but it's getting rid of any of the things that don't really add value to it. They
Mhm.
don't provide nutrition for you or anything else,
Yeah, it don't taste
right?
good.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I don't want to chew on my steak for 10 hours, and I want something that's actually tender and it tastes good. And that, so why should I waste my time on all this crap that doesn't matter?
Right.
Um, for me, I absolutely agree with you on a lot of things. Um, when you are doing stuff in that and you are putting like it's the same thing, like so you can get addicted to like working out, for example.
Mhm.
um, and you can get addicted to self-learning and these self-help and these other programs and building a business and all this other stuff.
Mhm.
um, and when it's healthy for you, it's when you kind of come to that realization that the things that you're doing is for you and not to please anybody else or to impress the Joneses or
Mhm.
to uh, live up to this expectation that you've put into your mind, that other people you think have, or associating with people you think are friends that are really not, that really suck the life out of you, but you feel guilted or pressured or obligated out of that friendship, family bond, whatever it
Mhm.
is. Even if they are severely toxic relationships, I
Mhm.
found that that's mostly where people start doing that, and then they'll again scroll substantially in that whenever they're refusing to confront some of those things.
Mhm.
or numb or neglect or whatever, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they just push it. And I was like, oh, well, they're family, they're blood, whatever. And that's the justification. Or, well, this is all my friends want to do. Like it was even with my brothers, the only quality time that we'd ever spend together was when we were drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to get to that point in my life and that where it's like, man, this is destroying me and it's destroying them. So either way, I'm not getting what I actually want out of this, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really don't. Like this sucks the life out of me. And so I had to like that is part of what I think you're also saying is like be aware with yourself. What actually makes you happy
Mm-hmm.
and stop doing all the other crap,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like long-term results. And I know with like I work out not because I want to, but because I know that it helps benefit me in all these other areas.
Right.
I
So,
do work on the business and I do paperwork, even though I hate paperwork because I'm like, hey, I know I need to get this done to get paid from these clients, or I know I need to get this done to accomplish this.
mm-hmm.
And yes, I will try to delegate it as much as possible,
Mm-hmm.
but I also can't be mad when those people usually mess it up or cause issues um, because and then I end up doing it twice or something because I refuse to do it. And it's okay for people to make mistakes, especially when you're training them and that you kind of have to give them liberty and you got to give yourself, I feel, a lot of that freedom to fail is what I call it.
Mm-hmm.
Because most people, as soon as they fail, 3 times, even 5 times or something, it's something they're like, oh, well, this is the universe telling me I'm not supposed to.
Supposed to do
I'm
it.
like, no, it's the universe telling you that you're not doing it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's testing
You're
you. I was just talking to one of my team yesterday, and he says, tough times come into your life to see if you really want what you say you want. And I just think that's like the toughest times come to the toughest people. So if your calling's big enough and your calling's bigger, you're going to have more challenges, period. So anyone that has the more challenges you have, the bigger your calling. And the more, the universe, God, whatever, I feel like Satan, I guess, whatever you want to say, somehow you're getting tested to see if what you say you want is what you really want. And most people don't really want what they say they want. And I think that's what's so important for people to really get focused on what do you want and not what someone tells you should want, but what do you want? And, even me, I'm working on that. Like, what do I really want? And it's not a thing necessarily, but whatever it is, you got to get like really attached to it. And that's what can drive you through all the tough times, the times you don't want to get out of bed in the morning. I did 75 hard and we were talking about that, man. That was the hardest thing I ever did physically because, for MS, walking for 45 minutes in my situation, man, like I was falling almost every day. And that was not fun at all. And it sucked. But it was a challenge to get me where I wanted to go. And so it just, you got to be really focused on that, and knowing that the challenges that come into your life are there to test you. And instead of them making you quit, they should excite you. If you can make it think that, if you can change your thoughts, they should excite you that you're becoming a butterfly. When you think of a caterpillar breaking through a cocoon, it's the hardest thing it ever does. If you help it, it dies. It needs to break through and become that butterfly. So anytime you're going through something tough, if you're listening to this and you're going through it right now, you might be becoming a butterfly. And so you got to break through it. So what I always tell myself is, and my team is double down on personal development and double down on your activity, and you'll break through that cocoon faster and get to be the next level faster.
Absolutely. And that's an excellent key. And I think the biggest key in that is so 2 different things. One is when you are, if something is hard, there's kind of a line, right? Because when you are in the thick of things, like a workout is going to be hard, but if you push yourself way too hard, you'll actually cause yourself injury, right?
Right.
So with a lot of people think that they have to lift the heaviest weight humanly possible to get in shape or get fit. And I actually tell them, I was like, no, you really don't. You actually lift a lighter weight and you build resistance to that. And it's more the execution of following on it consistently that allows you to build those muscles, that allows you to build that endurance, that allows you to build that strength and that. And it's the people that kind of go all the way to the heaviest. They go to the heaviest weight humanly possible. They don't have good form. They don't have good anything like disciplines going up to that. And because of that, they instantly get injured, and then now it sets them back substantially. And they do the same thing in their personal life, in their business, and all these other things, where they try to bite off all of this more than they can chew, if you will, and then wonder why they kind of get overwhelmed. Their health deteriorates, their body deteriorates, their business struggles, and everything else. So if things are getting hard, there's one of two things, like you said, is one is the universe is testing you, and two, you might be biting off a lot more than you can chew. I have a buddy that has a book that's called Single Threading that he's been working on for a while, and he talks a lot about to the extent of about what this is, which is essentially when you have your like numerous pokers in different fires, and that and you have all these different projects. Like even for me, I had a lot more businesses than what I currently have now, a lot more. But I realized that most of these other businesses and that, yeah, they were fun. Yeah, they gave a distraction. Yeah, but I was basically addicted to just starting new things and then getting stuck in that initial grind, if you will, of most startup companies. And I realized if I really wanted to build something successful, I had to cut and trim the fat off of all of that. So that is where I had to also be aware, like, hey, I need to cut all of this stuff out and focus my efforts on a singular goal or mission in order to accomplish what I wanted. Right?
It's good.
So either when you're biting off too much or not, but the other thing is like doing nothing, sitting there and twiddling your thumbs, that does even worse, right? Because now you're not building any muscles, you're not building any form, you're not building any discipline or anything out of your life, right? And I appreciate your time, by the way, and I know we're getting close to the kind of the end of this. I do like your metaphor though of the like, hey, the butterfly. Like if you help the butterfly, it will die. It's the same thing. I use this metaphor a lot, but it's the same parable of if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. Right. So I'd also challenge everybody that's listening to this. What are you doing to be the fisherman instead of the welfare candidate? Right. Are you actually taking, and the welfare candidate is the people that, again, go to these self-help seminars and all these other things, and they just sit there, listen, they absorb everything, and then they have that 3-day, hype up period, and then everything plummets off, right? They stop taking action, they stop taking disciplines and that. So that is one thing I would also like to ask you is what is one thing that has helped you? I know part of you said was your why has to be big enough, right? For you to want to get up and strive towards that goal. But when things did get exceptionally rough, what did you do to remind yourself of those things and really what you were trying to achieve and accomplish in both your life and your career?
Well, for me, and everyone that's listening, everyone has their own strengths. And I think one of the biggest things is people a lot of times try to work on their weaknesses instead of working on their strengths. And if you work on your strengths, that's when you become extraordinary. And most people, like I said, work on their weaknesses, which then brings their strength down and makes them average and ordinary. So one of my strengths, and I know this, is self-discipline and consistency. So I really sucked into that. Our habits create our future. So, people say to me, they're like, hey, well, how do you stay motivated? I'm like, I'm not motivated. However, I have habits. So I think one of the keys for a lot of people is creating a habit, and a habit that is actually doable. So a lot of people create habits. They're like, they get up, say at 8:00 and like, all right, tomorrow I'm going to wake up at 5. No, you're not. I mean, you might, but like, it's only going to be limited. It's too much of a gap. So like, you got to set yourself up. One thing I've realized, because I've analyzed my life a little bit, I was homeschooled, so I had to start analyzing based on other people. But I set myself up for wins. Like, I don't set very high standards in some areas, which I don't know if this is good or bad, but it sure works for me. Like when I started going to the gym a year and a half ago, I had never been to the gym. I said I would never go to the gym. I don't like the gym, blah, blah, blah. So I started changing my wording. I said, I'm going to be a gym rat. I'm going to be shredded. I started to work on what I said. But when I went into the gym, they signed me up and they're like, okay, well, how often are you going to work out? And I was like, 1 day a week. And they're like, that's not going to do much. And I was like, that's all I'm committing to, because I know that when I commit, I'll do it. I did 75 hard, but I also know that the first thing I cut is my sleeping. And I know I need my sleep. So I'm like, hey, I can't commit to more than 1 day a week. I'll commit. However, I started going 5 days a week. So here's what's cool. That really built my belief in myself, because I'm like, I said I would do 1 and I'm doing 5. Or you said you're doing 1, you're doing 3. Man, you're winning. And so I would do that with the numbers too. Like I said, I would get 3 new numbers a day, but if I get 10 or 12, man, I was like killing it. And I make so many calls a day, but I make more than that and I'd be killing it, but I wouldn't set the bar super high. To be honest, I'm still that way. It's not super high, but it's something I will not budge on. So when my bar, now it's 5 days a week and now I go 6 days a week. So I'm winning. And so like, I just like, you got to set the bar. I think like, if you're not, you never read and you're like, I'm going to become a reader. Well, you're not going to read a book in a week. You're like, start with a page a day. Start with something that is really doable and just do it consistently, because that's the key in my mind. Consistently every day. If you're not used to making calls, you're supposed to make calls. You're in a business of making calls. Make 1 call a day or 2 calls or whatever, but set it and do it for a month and then up it. So set yourself up for wins so that you can build habits, and then your habits will start to create your future, because habits are what creates our future, not an extreme burst of motivation. I see a lot of people, they're like, they go out and they just kill it, but it's like going to the gym for like, 1 day a week or 1 day a month and going there for 10 hours. Well, that's not going to do anything compared to going like 20 minutes or 30 minutes a day. It's going to do way more than going like a whole bunch at once. So I think one of the things that I've got good at is like building habits that, I just crush them. So I'm always like, my self-confidence is also high, because I'm like, I kept the promises. Because here's something I heard. It's on Ed Milet podcast, so you might have heard it, but I just thought it was so good. We tell our kids you have kids, so you get this. You have kids, we tell them we're going to pick them up from school at 3, we pick them up at 3. We tell our mom and dad, that we're going to take them to the hospital, we take them to the hospital. We tell ourselves we're going to get up when the alarm goes, and we don't get up. Why? Because we don't respect and love ourselves enough. We love them and we respect them to honor their time, but when we tell ourselves something and we let ourselves down, that just means we don't respect and love ourselves. So if you're letting yourself down, got to build this is self-love. Like, it's not going to get a manicure and a pedicure. That's great if you do that stuff, fine. But it's like keeping the discipline that you say to yourself, because that is the way that you actually show yourself that you love yourself. And so I just think that that's like the key, is like, for me anyway, is like just setting habits, building habits, and winning every day, and winning it for yourself, not for anyone else, just for yourself. And then that'll build your confidence and your habits that will create your life.
Absolutely. And granted, when I used to work out 6 days a week, like, yeah, it was great. And I definitely got more results than doing nothing. Right. But I also got to that point where I was like, hey, I'm very disappointed with the results that I am getting. I feel like no matter what I'm doing, I'm not achieving that. Doesn't mean that working out doesn't work. It means something I was doing wasn't allowing me to get the goals or the fruition, but I had the mental discipline, right? So that's the next phase. After you have the discipline to consistently keep your word to yourself, it's then figuring out and tweaking it to actually make it work for you. So for me, 4 days a week working out is really all I need. And that's because I have to, in order to build strength or gain back my mass and everything, I have to do extensive like 2-hour workouts, and then give myself periods of rest to do that. But if I'm cutting, if you will, which just means that I'm getting more muscle definition or anything else. So I've built up a lot of muscle, and now I'm to a cutting phase, which is where you actually have your abs pop out, or your different muscles and that you're trying to show. That is where you start doing more workouts. Like, you go back up to 6 days a week, but you don't do nearly as much workouts, right? So you're doing a lot, like higher reps and lower weights, substantially lower weight. because you're basically the principle is and even honestly, if you're cutting two, the other thing is you go into a calorie deficit and then you just walk, and it's consistently the act of just consistently being moving all the time, and your lifestyle throughout that day that really comes in to a huge play on how things play out for you, right? So if I'm trying to, again, if I'm working out and doing excessive amount of weight every single day, and I did that for the full 6 days, what happens is your muscles actually will deteriorate. They'll start eating themselves, and then you don't ever give your body enough time to rebuild. And so you don't ever get the results or anything else. And that's where it's defeating, and you start having health issues, and you start having all this other stuff, even though coherently the skill of working out is good. So really what I'm telling you here, and what even Angelo said here, and admire it, is there's moderation in all things and consistency. But if you want to build like actual confidence in yourself, the easiest way to do that is by doing what she said, which is at least making what you can commit to and hold yourself to, and then follow through on that. That helps build your own subconscious belief, if you will, and also helps you build confidence in yourself that you are able to execute and accomplish these things. And then slowly over time, though, you start learning all these other details. You don't need to know everything about working out. You don't need to know everything about nutrition. You don't need to know everything about running a business, having a family, or anything else. Like, even you can read all the self-help books and that, even on being a parent or having kids, all day and that, and you could do it for 5 years straight, every single day reading a book. It will never fucking prepare you, excuse my French, but it will never prepare you for the kids. Like, yes, you will have some at least basic understanding. You might learn some core disciplines and that help them be a better like raised into a better adult. How to cope with things when things are stressful, when things aren't behaving, creating routines for your kids so that they can thrive within that, because they know what's expected of them, and they know what's expected of you and everything as the parent and the role model and everything. Because a lot of parents, especially in today's world, have this weird mentality. It's like, well, let them be them. I was like, no, kids thrive within structure, like routines and everything. Like, it's as much as you can to have breakfast every day around the same time, dinner every time at the same time, quality one-on-one time around the same time. As long as you know those core things, you will figure out the rest as things go, because every child is somewhat different, right? The same thing again with working out, same thing with business. You will never know everything, every possible solution that will come up. What can you do to at least take those next steps? At least, like Angela said, she just committed to at least that one day, at least that discipline, that core fundamental skill, and then built off of that.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Anyway, that's a rant and everything. Anything else that, Angela, that really has come to your mind? Anything that has really been a huge monumental or keystone, if you will, in your life?
No, I think we touched on basically everything. That was an awesome conversation. I learned a lot from you, and hopefully our listeners learned lots from both of us.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you taking the time again to be part of this podcast and to give value and pour into that. So, Angela, if somebody wants to look you up, where should they go?
Probably the best way would be Instagram, real Angela Bradford, one word. And yeah, definitely reach out and be happy to chat.
All right, guys. Well, again, we appreciate you. If you got value out of this, please share the show. That's the only way we really grow. And we really do, like, that's kind of my selfish desire out of all this. Like, I've said this from the very beginning. I haven't been coy about it, but I want my legacy to be like, hey, I impacted all these people. and it's not like I don't really care if people remember my name or anything else. But what I do care is I was able to say that I was a part of helping you get to the next stage of your life, helping you and your family and change the trajectory of your entire life. And let this be the moment that says, hey, this is the moment where you say enough is enough. You're tired of mediocrity, and that you really want to accomplish and thrive within your life right now and all the goals that you've set. So again, please share that. That's the only way we get this message out. It's the only way we help other people grow, and we help other people collectively get better in their life. And that's how we really change this world into a better place than the crap that we're seeing right now. So we will catch you guys on the next podcast. Thanks. Have a great day.